Oi, oi, it's your boy, something of a snack, Jack Slack, and it's the Jack Slack podcast. We're coming at you on Monday the 10th, and we're talking about all the fights that happened at the weekend. I think we should start in the obvious place, the one that everyone was looking forward to, Michelle Waterson versus Marina Rodriguez. Bumped up to the main event position at the last minute when TJ Dillashaw versus Corey Sandhagen was taken off this card. Yep, we could have had that. And yeah, it was okay. I mean, you know the deal with Michelle Waterson by now. The way that she kicks works if people walk onto her the entire time. Doesn't work if she has to go and find the opponent. And you saw both of those in this fight. When Rodriguez was going to her, the sidekick was actually doing some damage, both to the lead leg and the midsection. And then when Marina Rodriguez stopped moving to her, like at the start of the second or third round or whatever it is, and Michelle Waterson had to go and find her, Michelle Waterson dives in with a sidekick, misses, and falls on her back. That's the story of Michelle Waterson. She's going to use the sidekick, the counter right hook, the odd hook kick, and that's her thing. When she's made to go to people, she looks a lot worse. I will say that in this fight, I was a little bit underwhelmed with Rodriguez's shot selection, particularly in the later rounds. She was doing a lot of sort of flurrying against the guard and not digging to the body or the legs as much. She was doing great work to the lead leg in the opening few rounds. Really swelled up Michelle Waterson's Chun-Li thigh. And then Michelle Waterson managed to, they both did the low kick to high kick on the opposite side, which is a cool combination you don't see an awful lot. Even though, I think it's weird because it's kind of like an old school American karate combination to go low kick, high kick, opposite sides. But both of them did it, and Michelle Waterson managed to catch Rodriguez across the face and swell up her cheekbone something nasty. Kind of like Canelo versus Billy Joe. So a Michelle Waterson kick as powerful as a Canelo punch. But yeah, that was quite cool. But an awful lot of whiffing on things, and a weird amount of Dominic Cruz being like, Michelle Waterson is so accurate. You're going, Dom, have you watched no tape on Michelle Waterson? I've always said that Michelle Waterson's better as a grappler anyway, and that was true in Invicta. She would do well in the striking when they hired like an old lady, a 50-year-old from Japan, to come in and get kicked by her. But most of her actual effective work was grappling, and she's always been impressive wrestling because she takes down much bigger opponents like what's her name, the massive lass. The fight that Michelle Waterson should have lost, but won. Can't remember her name. But yeah, she always takes down much bigger opponents, and she did that here with Marina Rodriguez. And Rodriguez couldn't get up, which is a little bit concerning for her future. But yes, not as bad as expect. Well, to be honest, I didn't expect too terrible as far as Waterson fights go, because we watched Angie Hill put it on Waterson, and Waterson actually fight effectively because someone was going on to her the entire time. It's like, sidekicking generally. If you watch Stephen Thompson, the times that he lands sidekicks, tends to do it like off the dart, because he'll turn and he'll dart around the opponent. The opponent will turn and walk to him, and he'll sidekick them on the way in, and that's where he does all his best sidekicking. But that was your main event. What else was good on this card? Carlton Harris scored an awesome anaconda choke on the undercard. That was the first fight of the night. The anaconda choke is something that we still don't see an awful lot. But back in like 2009, maybe it was 2011, maybe it's I think it was 2009. It was Rafa Mendez's first run through ADCC. He basically reinvented the anaconda by diving over the top of people and like doing basically like a front headlock, but you're both looking at the ceiling, and he'd anaconda choke people from there, and it really opened things up. So you see guys like Brian Ortega doing that now, and using the leg to hook the opponent's elbow and pull it down across them while you lock the choke, which is what Carlton Harris did here. He got his gable grip on the back of Aguilera's tricep, rolled through, and then immediately brought his leg up to hook the crook of the elbow and pull it down while he locked his hands. Go watch that a few times because it was awesome. But it's come a long way since Milton Vieira was just sort of like grabbing it and trying to gator roll with it. And Big Nog, that's where Big Nog got it from. They were training partners. Lots of uninteresting stuff on the undercard. I think Neil Magny versus Jeff Neal deserves some discussion. We thought that might be interesting, but This really just goes in with what I was saying about Jeff Neal last time out against Wonderboy. He's been getting by on these physical attributes, and the physical attributes are still extremely dangerous. I think he's more explosive and faster, like, on the strike than Wonderboy. He's definitely more explosive and more powerful than Neil Magny, but he just fought both those fights in ways that didn't really help that at all. He's so honest with what he's doing. It's like, I'm going to throw left straights at your head, and I'm going to throw left high kicks at your head. And so, if the guy has talent and skill and smarts, you're giving him a completely honest fight and you're saying this is what's coming. He's going to adapt to that and he's going to try and make the best of it. And if he's good, he's going to be able to. So much of good fighting at the highest levels is deception, and Jeff Neal has none of it. And I did lose it a bit last time when I was talking about the Wonderboy fight, and people were like, well, of course he threw no low kicks or body shots. That's not who Jeff Neal is. And you're like, well, no, it doesn't take a whole lot to learn how to do that. And obviously he does do that in the gym. I've seen him land body kicks in like the odd fight. But if you can't like adapt, you're never going to be the highest level of fighter. And if you can't, the most basic kind of adaptation is hitting somewhere different. You're not asking him to change up his whole style and go and hit a load of high crotches or pull guard on the guy or something like that. You're just asking him to hit somewhere different, and he's not doing it. And I don't know I didn't listen to what his corner was saying, but if they weren't telling him to, hit the body, hit the legs, stop swinging for the head. Let's talk about how Magny did this for a start, because it was very impressive. What he'd do was Neil would come in on him, or he'd go in on Neil, and he'd grab the double collar tie, being the taller man, and Jeff Neal would grab a body lock around his waist or upper back and pull him in to take away the knee up the middle. And Jeff Neal would push him to the fence, and then Neil Magny would let go and be like, cool, I can work from here, and you're not able to hit me. And so those portions along the fence play out. Like if you watch those portions along the fence, Magny will be along the fence with his back to the fence, and he'll be using his leg to hook around the back of Jeff Neal's leg. Not a useful position at all if the guy's going to try and take you down, but to keep locked to him and keep the clinch happening, very useful. It was like Jessica Penne the other week trying to jump triangles along the cage. And Aoki did it against, what's his name? Edward Foliang. In their most recent fight, Aoki tries to take him down. Foliang digs underhooks and pulls him up and pushes him against the fence. Aoki grabs the overhook and wrist control and jumps up for a triangle, or threatens to jump up for a triangle, which is something he's done before. He did it to Akira Kikuchi like a dozen times. And instead, like he goes to jump, and Foliang like postures up as hard as he can, and then Aoki drops his feet to the floor in position to hit an outside trip. It's absolutely gorgeous. Go watch that fight. I mean, it's free on YouTube. It's ONE FC. So that is incredible. But yeah, Magny was using his legs to hook himself onto Neil and pull him in along the fence. And basically, Neil was trying to free an arm to punch him in the head as hard as he could. And every time he did, Magny, who's like a foot taller than him, would duck under the punch. It was kind of like Verdum versus Big Nog. He got pushed against the fence, and he'd just wait for Big Nog to try and hit him in the head and duck under his armpit. And the way that Magny made it happen over and over again, like if Neil didn't try and grab him, he'd grab the double collar tie, and Jeff Neal would instinctively try and pull him in as close as possible and then run to the fence. It was real impressive. But Jeff Neal, Neil Magny has trouble with low kicks. You don't need, we could go back to the Lorenz Larkin fight where he was completely undone by them, but you only need to go back to the Rafael dos Anjos fight. He stands very long, he's very tall, he's very gangly, and he uses the jab a lot. So all those things don't help if you get kicked in the calf. You're probably going to lose your balance. But Jeff Neal, I went back, 8 fights in the UFC, 13 low kicks. Attempted, that is. Absolutely incredible. And this brings me back to something that I was watching this weekend. Shout out to BJJ Fanatics again, but they got Skarbowski back to do an advanced Muay Thai DVD. And Skarbowski's brilliant. If you don't remember Skarbowski, he turned up on Tough and beat everyone up. It was great, drunk. Depending on, he said it was misrepresentative of what actually happened. But he's famous for, he beat both stadium champions in Thailand. Basically, as Farangs, foreigners doing Muay Thai in Thailand go, he's one of the best. And the reason he's one of the best, and he really talked about it on this new DVD, it's fantastic. He basically said, lots of foreigners come over and they manage to knock out Thais with their punching and moving through, and you have to go, you have to really be aggressive to do that. And he said that at a certain point he wasn't happy with that because that's how he came in. He was a big puncher, and he said that was good for winning small titles and things, but to be a professional you ought to be able to do it every other week. And if you're wading through elbows to try and knock people out with punches, it doesn't work like that. And it's just full of him, clips of him being like, so I kick for the wrist and I land with my foot, and that's not going to knock anyone out, but it will off balance them and keep them from working. And it's just interesting because it's a guy who came in as a good finisher and realized that a lot of the time, to beat very good people, you got to focus on stuff that isn't finishing. And this ties in sort of with some stuff from the Juan Archuleta Sergio Pettis fight that I'm going to talk about, and then the examples I always give of Mayweather. Mayweather, damn near untouchable at his best, at least. But a couple of people who did really well against him, or a couple of moments of real success against him, Shane Mosley, Miguel Cotto, Maidana a little bit, Canelo a little bit in their fight, but he's so good from the stone wall. He presents so few targets. His right hand's always up to parry the jab and check the hook. His left hand is down and presenting basically just the side of his arm to you from the front. You can't hit the back side of his body because most of it's an illegal target. So, you really have to try and land lefts to his body and head. And the guys who've had moments of success against him, a lot of them have just done it with the body jab. I mean, Mayweather has an awesome body jab in his own right, but he definitely gets into the habit of being a perfectionist. And the body jabs these guys land on him probably not going to cause him an awful lot of problems in the long run through the fight. But if guys do it, he starts reaching down for it just because he doesn't like conceding a point like that. And then guys can come upstairs with left hooks or right hands across the top as Mosley did. And, I'm not saying that's killing the king, Floyd Mayweather, this is how you do it. I'm just saying that, against really good guys, you're not going to clock them on the chin just off the bat. And if you do, they can take a good shot on the chin because they've made it this far as a fighter. And, you might open yourself up to something coming back or to being clinched, as Jeff Neal did every time against Neil Magny here. You've got to start with stuff that's not giving up any opportunities. And body jabs are a great example in both boxing and MMA. But Juan Archuleta, he was doing the stupid leg jab, which we all think is silly, but he did eventually use it to set up a nice high crotch on Pettis in the later rounds. It's start scoring something. Don't just try and knock people out. But if this one doesn't make Jeff Neal go back to the drawing board, I don't know what will. Because to be honest, he could not go back to the drawing board and they could put him in with a decent guy who doesn't have the smothering clinch chops of Neil Magny or the movement of Stephen Thompson, and he'll never have to change. He could hang around the UFC forever just sparking people until he slows down. It's just I believe that he has the kind of physical talents and, decent conditioning that he could definitely make the jump to being a much better fighter than he is, or a much higher ranked fighter than he is. And there are so many examples of this now in MMA that I don't know why people are hung up on Jeff Neal being like, oh, he can't change. Just in the lightweight division alone, Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje, Charles Oliveira, just full of guys who have reinvented themselves. To a degree, Beneil Dariush, Diego Ferreira, loads of dudes who just couldn't do things and then learned to do the things. And that's an even more stacked division than welterweight. Speaking of lightweight, Gregor Gillespie versus Diego Ferreira, I said this would be good. I put some money on, who was it? It was Gillespie, Rebus, and Magny. That was it. I did a little parlay on the three of them, and I thought that was quite a good... I thought that was quite a clever one. Sometimes, a lot of the time I meme bet, but I did all in on Coca this week. But that seemed like quite a smart one, because that came back at I bet £3 on it, and I would have won £18 on that. So if if you're a big spender, you could win a lot of money on that. But I was pretty confident in Gillespie going into this because he's just so smothering and relentless. But even then, I saw some stuff after this being like, Diego Ferreira, was supposed to be the Khabib killer, and now he's just some... And you're like, no, did you watch the fight? It was back and forth, and it was fucking awesome. Diego Ferreira did come in... Was he 160? 4 or 5 pounds heavy. And that's after, he didn't do nothing to get on the scale. He would have drained himself to get on the scale. So I like Diego Ferreira a lot, but it's very sketchy to do that. It seems like you're trying to cheat, and I have seen people do that, like sacrifice 20-30% of your purse just to beat the shit out of someone. Who was it? Not Charles Oliveira. Alex Oliveira, the greatest cheater in MMA history. Against Will Brooks, he comes in like 7 pounds heavy and smashes Will Brooks, and his cardio wasn't suffering, so it was almost like he decided, I'm going to come in 7 pounds heavy really early in the camp and then trained hard to do that. But on the upside, Gillespie made a fortune out of this fight, compared to what he was going to make, because he got show money, win money, 30% of Ferreira's purse, and he also got performance of the night. And I think, did they get fight of the night? Could have done. I mean, it was good while it lasted. But, MMA grappling contest, people say like Newton versus Sakuraba. One of my favorites was Charles Oliveira versus Hatsu Hioki. Paddy Houlihan versus friend of the podcast, Lewis Smolka. There's a few good ones, but this one really was shit hot. And we talked about it before the fight, and I said, one of the things that I really like about Gillespie is his really short level changes onto double legs, and I thought that might give Ferreira some trouble because Ferreira does well attacking off the single leg, and wouldn't you know, Gregor Gillespie comes out, attacks single legs through the entire first round, and Oliveira is attacking him constantly off them, like threatening omoplatas, threatening. He did crucifix him. He's crucifixed Beneil Dariush, Diego Ferreira, Rustam Habilov. He did it jumping over Rustam Habilov's head. If he were just a little bit more effective from the crucifix, because he can get it from everywhere, the crucifix is a tricky position because you're relying on. Well, I mean, it's similar to what Dan Henderson used to do from the bottom of a side control. He'd catch the guy's the arm nearest his legs. He'd catch it between his thighs, and you can sort of hold their arm, but at some point it's going to slip out. And it's the same with the crucifix. It's very hard to keep control of, and it's hard to choke people from there. And you could use the Gary Goodridge elbow, but it's very hard against competent opponents who are moving and are threatening to get out every time you do that. So there's a few interesting ways I've seen guys use it. And one of the most interesting was Gordon Ryan in ADCC against, is it Lucas Barbosa? He gets the crucifix, and he really there's time on the clock. It's inside the last 10 minutes or whatever. Points are on the clock. Or points are on the board rather. So he can score points, but you don't score points for the crucifix. You score points for back control with the hooks in. So he decides to switch from the crucifix to the back, and he does it by reaching back and doing a crotch lock, locking his hands underneath Barbosa's crotch, putting himself into a crackdown from like a high crotch position, and pulling Barbosa's shoulder through and going to his back. But basically, he had to retreat from a crucifix, which is a really good outcome from being taken down into like the crackdown. He retreats to the crackdown to attack the back. So something that it would be interesting to see Diego Ferreira do that, because Diego Ferreira gets the crucifix all the time and doesn't really do much with it. But in this fight, there was that same disconnect between Diego Ferreira and his corner, because he trains. He has his own gym, and then he drives like 9 hours across Texas to train with, I think it's Fortis MMA, and obviously Diego Ferreira is doing all this stuff where he's attacking off his back, he's attacking submissions on the way down, and his corner is screaming at him to get up the entire time. And you get the sense that maybe maybe they're not training together as much as they should be to actually understand each other all that well. And I think that's both ways, because Diego Ferreira is very effective attacking people while sort of putting his back to the mat. But equally, there are definitely times when he should be just getting up. And I think that was definitely true in moments of the Dariush fight. Dariush is so slick on the ground, and he did attack him with some very legitimate attempts. But I feel like he could have done even better if he was playing the threat of getting up off that more effectively. It's tough. It's tough because the moment you become dangerous attacking people on the way down or from your back, it's very, it's seductive. I think it was Chris Houter described the guard as seductive. The moment you get good at it, you don't want to learn to wrestle, in jiu-jitsu at least. In MMA, you can get too comfortable there when you're just, you could be scoring points, but you're probably not. And it gives you the confidence to like jump guillotines on people, which is jumping guillotine is the easiest way to lose a professional MMA fight if you're fighting anyone near your own level. Because you're putting yourself in closed guard with the guy flattened on top of you. If he doesn't do anything and you don't have a good bite on his neck, he can not let you up until the referee lets you up. But I think what was amazing about this fight was the first round was like a lesson in how to deal with an awesome wrestler if you're a jiu-jitsu player. Because Ferreira was feeding the single, limp-legging him down, or limp-legging out. It was shades of Aldo there. Attacking crucifixes, never staying on his back long, just doing awesome, awesome work. Did he get his back at one point? I can't remember. But basically, end of the first round, Gregor Gillespie stumbling in his corner. And they send him back out, and he just wears Diego Ferreira down. It was incredible. Like, Diego Ferreira was doing well, and Gregor Gillespie wasn't doing as well as he normally does. And by making Ferreira do more of it, he just tired him out to the point that Ferreira couldn't resist. Daniel Cormier said he basically just broke him with his will, and I don't think that's far wrong. So many guys that Gillespie fights just can't get anything going. And in this fight, Gillespie couldn't really get anything going, but he just did it until the other guy gave up. It was incredible. I can't remember many of the specific details right now because I watched it yesterday, but just such a fun, scrambly matchup. I think there are things you can learn from both fighters. And I think it was just, that's that division. You can't go wrong with, especially this matchup, because this is just a gorgeous matchup, but you cannot go wrong in that division. And then you had Alex Moreno versus Donald Cerrone, which was just a little bit sad, to be honest. Actually, that might be a little bit unfair to Moreno. I thought he did a good job. It's weird because Donald Cerrone went from getting almost an assured victory against the ghost of Diego Sanchez in the original matchup to, is he on 0-5-1? This was just another one of those, how many times do we have to teach you this lesson, old man, fights. Moreno, obviously the less polished looking striker, doing some interesting stuff, like he was pumping triple jabs, getting Cerrone moving his head and then cracking with the right hand. But it just seemed like Donald Cerrone had a lot of trouble dealing or timing Moreno the same way that he would back in the day. Moreno was very obviously faster than him, even though his technique was a little bit sort of spazzy and all over the place. But that's getting old. I hate to tell you this, if you've been watching Donald Cerrone for the last 10 years or whatever, you are also 10 years older. There was a cool one where Moreno hit an outside trip along the fence, just a quick one to get Cerrone on the mat, stayed standing, stood near him, but it was like, I'm not engaging you. And Cerrone did the laziest technical stand-up right in front of the dude, and Moreno just hit him on the jaw as soon as he was up. But you saw a lot of classic Cerrone moves, right from the get-go, ducks in on the takedown, which was his move at welterweight. Like when he couldn't keep up with guys, he'd duck it on the takedown attempt. Because he was never good at completing takedowns, but by threatening to do them, he opened things up for himself. And there were some really nice body kicks when Moreno jabbed. He would parry the jab with his right hand and throw the left body kick to the body, catch him under the elbow, which was really nice. Did it a few times. And that links in with some stuff we're going to talk about in Bellator right now. So the Bellator card, honestly, not bad. Bit of a weird one, all in on Coca-wise, because I think everyone else has taken to doing all in on Coca. But some of these matches, blatant mismatches. Patchy Mix was 1-9 odds you got on him. Logan Storley was like 1-7, but then the fight was off. But sometimes you look at them and go, that guy shouldn't be the favourite. And the one that I did look at like that was Weber Almeida, who I like. He was trained by the Machida brothers, but also places no value on the straight punch. He's like, yes, I'm going to do Machida karate, but also straight punching is for pussies. So he's trying to time like Machida style counters, but with just spastic overhands. And he plays in an orchestra in Brazil, like the Brazilian National Orchestra. He's the clarinetist or something like that. But yeah, interesting character. Scores some interesting knockouts, but ended up losing in this one, blowing my all-in-on Coca on the undercard. And then Peter Queeley blew the one on the main card because, of course, Patricky Pitbull's going to lose when he's supposed to win. We'll talk about the main card. Michael Page, Canderson Silva himself, fought Derek, definitely not Arkan Anderson. No, Derek Anderson, decent lightweight in Bellator, but really, when you look at the Bellator rankings, you realise that, as we always say, they've got about 10% of the best fighters in the world, and that means that they have about 3 good fighters in every division, and then it just falls off a cliff the moment you go down the rankings. I mean, the obvious one we talk about is like, they have Gegard Mousasi, they had Rafael Lovato, they got John Salter, they got a couple of middleweights, and then when you get down to the position that Jack Hermansson is in the UFC rankings, you got Charlie Ward. So, there's a very obvious gap in the depth of the divisions. And Michael Page, I talked about this last week, but Big John and Josh Thompson, just their podcast, I did listen to some of it, but they went off on like, anyone calling MVP a can should fight him. They're like, 1, no one's calling him a can. 2, how would random person fighting Michael Page stop the criticism of Michael Page fighting cans? Thanks, Big John, you genius. This is it. I say every time, like, I'm the biggest mainstream podcast in MMA covering Bellator, or the only one. I'm changing that. I'm the only one who's not required to, because Big John and Josh Thompson pick up a paycheck from them, and Morning Combat, they're tied in with Showtime. So I'm the only one giving it to you real, because I'm not actually paid by any of these people, which is why I can also say that UFC events are shit when they are. But Michael Page, I said this last time, Ross Houston is a good fighter. He was the Cage Warriors champion. He had a great fight with Nicholas Delby, the one I always recommend, because it's the only time you will ever see a fight stopped due to too much blood on the mat. Gave us the immortal line from Mark Goddard, "It's fucking ridiculous," and then called him the no contest, because they both stood over the other one in guard and then threw a kick at the grounded fighter's legs and slipped over, and the other guy got on top. They both did that before the fight was called. It was amazing. Just fighting on a fucking slip and slide. But Ross Houston was good, and MVP beat him. But there was a tipping point. There was a long time when people weren't talking about the fact that MVP fights cans, when he was fighting like the ghost of Cyborg Santos and so on. And then at some point people realised, and I think it was probably something to do with the fact that he fought the current welterweight champion, lost, and then they rebounded him with a fight against a 3-1 maths teacher. This guy with 15 fights who is evidently a world-class talent, and he's fighting a 3-1 part-time fighter. And that was Richard Queeley, and he went on to fight my boy George Hardwick, and George Hardwick beat him just as decisively, and George Hardwick has like 5 fights himself, or as a pro at least. It's not even that like these people are trash, it's that you're giving him people who he just shouldn't be fighting. Promotional malpractice, as Luke Thomas would say if he didn't have to interview Scott Coker. It's bullshit, and people know that it's bullshit, and as soon as you've done that and people realise, it doesn't matter that he's now fighting Cage Warriors welterweight champion. People have picked up on it. As it was, he fought by Derek Anderson, and he did a good job, and Derek Anderson basically couldn't cut the cage on him, couldn't kick his legs, tried to like lure him into overcommitting by dropping his hands, and just got blasted in the face every time he did it. Someone said something interesting to me on Twitter, which was they liked to compare MVP's career to Kamaru Usman, because MVP is about a month older. They started about the same time as professionals, and Kamaru Usman by his 10th fight is fighting good fighters, and MVP is still fighting like the guys you would fight in your 3rd fight, and then also the odd fight against someone who's actually known. So yeah, bit strange. And I don't think that anyone has any trouble with the truth, which is MVP is obviously a super talented fighter, and Scott Coker loves booking him into shitty mismatches. What else happened? Rumble returned. He's down from 300 pounds to 205. Actually looked like just fine. Didn't look like he'd killed himself to make the weight. The other guy was bigger than him, so that was impressive. But this guy Augusto, he breaks his right hand on either Rumble's head or guard. But then every time he throws it, he does like a theatrical grabbing of his own fist. And you're going, oh, well, that's really why you need to bring some stank from both sides of the plate. Oh, sorry, it's Azevedo, not Augusto, whatever I called him. Oh, no, he is Augusto, Jose Augusto. But that's why you need something from both hands. There are a lot of guys who get very famous for being hitters and really don't have the same, or even close to the same level of power from the other side. And there are times that it makes it difficult for you as like a ring cutter. A ring cutter, you really need weapons on both sides to punish movement that way or this way or that way. You can't even see where I'm pointing. But you always need to back up also if you break your fucking hand, because your hands are incredibly fragile. It's like we're talking about broken noses because Derek Anderson got his nose flattened all over his face, and so did Dom Reyes the other week. Like, that's just expected. It will happen at some point if you're fighting. Even if you're Lyoto Machida and you barely ever actually get into exchanges with people, you will at some point take something on the nose and it will probably break. And if you're hitting people with your hands, which everyone in MMA is, at some point you're going to catch it just a little bit wrong, and you're either going to fuck up a finger or a thumb or your wrist. Wrist is less likely because you wear hand wraps, but fingers, so easy to break. And of course, the bones in the back of your hand. It's a sack of pebbles, your hand. It's not like when you compare it to your elbow or your knee or your shin, it's so obvious why, we have a hierarchy of like what you can hit with. Your hands are the safest because you can move your feet and they're the longest upper body strike and you keep control of your balance while you're doing it. But as a striking surface, they're a bit shit. But Azevedo really looked like he didn't have anything to keep Rumble off him, because that is the thing. Like, no matter how good a technical fighter you are, and this, Azevedo is, or Augusto, whatever his name is, not a great technical fighter. But no matter how great a technical fighter you are, you need something there to stop the guy from taking the piss and just walking you down. And for everyone, or almost everyone, that is the stiff right hand. And the moment that disappears, you've got real issues. Luckily, he did actually manage to cover up and throw a good left hook back, wobbled Rumble off the cage, and came close to stopping him. But then Rumble comes out for the second round, inside low kick, jab overhand, knocks him out. Fantastic stuff. But yeah, a little bit of unexpected drama in what was, looked like a walkover. Because if you're preparing for Yoel Romero, this isn't you preparing for the ghost of Diego Sanchez and getting Alex Moreno. This is you preparing for Yoel Romero and getting some guy that's barely known. Peter Queeley versus Patrick Pitbull. I thought these guys had a fun fight, but the whole time I was watching it, it just made me think like Francisco Trinaldo would run through Bellator's lightweight division. Peter Queeley has that weird SBGI striking style where they stand with their feet like on a tightrope and their upper body square, and then they throw jabs. And Patrick Pitbull actually looked good on the feet. He was catching him with some nice body shots and stuff, but got absolutely lacerated. He took Queeley down, and Queeley's like, I think Queeley did the cut on the feet actually, but he took him down, and Queeley's throwing, not 12 to 6 elbows, but downward elbows from his back, and he's throwing them into the eye of Patrick Pitbull. And he landed like 2 after the bell as well, which was great. And that caused a little argument between him and Patricio, but yeah, nasty cut opened up in this one, and it was literally in the eye, so they couldn't let Patrick Pitbull continue. This decides the future of the lightweight division for Bellator, because basically Patricio Pitbull won the lightweight belt from Chandler in he went up for one fight to do that fight, won it with like the first punch he threw, and then he was like, I'm going to sit on this belt until you let my brother have it. And, so this fight was like to decide, should we give the vacant belt too? And now that Patrick Pitbull's lost to Queeley, I imagine that Patricio is going to go, actually, I'm going to defend that belt against Queeley. But no, I thought it was good fun. Queeley's an interesting guy because like I think his nickname's the Showstopper or something like that. But where people like James Gallagher have been stopping guys forever. Peter Queeley had never finished a fight until his 15th bout in 2018. And since then, he's stopped everyone he's beat. It's weird. Things like that happen. Machida didn't stop anyone and then suddenly became this knockout artist. And a lot of it, as much as it's to do with like getting a strength and conditioning coach, getting some more power, some mass on you, like it's just as much to do with being comfortable under fire. The moment you get more comfortable taking risks, the moment you're more dangerous. And of course, like actually finishing people once they're hurt is a whole nother thing to actually just having the power to hurt people. Especially when you're talking like outside of, say, light heavyweight, where one punch can do it. If you're a lightweight, sometimes one punch can do it, but you're normally going to have to jump on someone who's hurt, and they're going to try and tie you up, or cover up, or run. And you've actually got to have that skill of, when I say being a good finisher, there's a difference between like being a good knockout artist, with one punch, and actually being able to keep it on and finish someone once they're hurt, especially if they're good. So yeah, actually not a bad fight between Queeley and Patrick Pitbull. I just, it did seem to me like these guys would have real trouble against a lot of the sort of mid-range guys in the UFC division. And then the main event was Sergio Pettis versus Juan Archuleta. Sergio Pettis, I used to be hot on when he was on that little run. And then he met Juicy Formiga. And it really hacked me off because he did great work for like one and a half rounds. And then Juicy Formiga jumped on his back. And Pettis was like, okay, well, I'll just wait here then. And then lost the fight. He really lacks urgency. And in this one, like it was pretty much the Joseph Benavidez fight. Because Juan Archuleta was trying to close the distance. He wasn't doing it very cleverly. He was just sort of charging him with his face. And Pettis would either take the punch or cover against the punch and return with the right hand. And every time, Archuleta's head was just there for it. But he also, when Archuleta tried to jab in, Pettis would parry the jab and either kick the right side or the left side of the body. And he alternated throughout the bout, which was really nice. Threw some jumping kicks, which came nowhere close, but they were cool nonetheless. And did good work with his own jab. And Archuleta did lots of... This is the thing with Archuleta. I did some stuff on him for the Patreon boys a while ago. He's a TJ Dillashaw training partner. He does lots of sort of like spazzing out on the feet and then awesome takedowns. Lots of really good chain wrestling. But, the striking is very far removed from the grappling. And, you'll see him do cool things like TJ Dillashaw does. Like he punched his way in, grabbed a single leg, and sat down to reap the leg on the same side. Kind of like TJ Dillashaw does with his double leg, where he shoots the double he boxes into the double and then does like a foot sweep, not a foot, it's called a reap in judo, but like a trip on the same side by driving them over his leg. And Archuleta did that to Pettis at one point. But, the problem that a lot of guys have, if you fight TJ Dillashaw, most of the time, he's going to be comfortable both boxing or striking rather and wrestling. In this one, it was when Pettis was able to separate the striking from the wrestling. And because Archuleta couldn't get the takedowns going without boxing his way in, he had to try and awkwardly box his way in. And Pettis was just picking him off with counters. It was really nice. It was the best Pettis had looked for a while. I think he benefited a lot from the matchup. As we were talking about with Waterson and people like that. Honestly, everyone benefits from matchups. I don't want to make it seem like you're a crap fighter if you don't have, if you're not much better against one kind of fighter than another. But I think Pettis really benefited from Archuleta being very similar to Joseph Benavidez. And even Duke Rufus was shouting just like against Benavidez throughout this entire fight. But yeah, good for Pettis. And it's an interesting thing because ESPN put up a thing saying, a year ago, one of the greats retired with Henry Cejudo there. And obviously, so many people are so mad about Henry Cejudo being considered a great. But he did beat the best flyweight of all time, then the best two bantamweights of all time, and the number one contender between them, back to back. And that, now Sergio Pettis is the Bellator bantamweight champion. He, this is a couple of fights removed from him losing to Henry Cejudo. So, Henry Cejudo's record looking pretty fucking good. And I said this last time I wrote about him, but yes, we haven't had a lot, there's a lot of unanswered questions. But if you're going to pretend that he wasn't one of the best talents we've ever seen, I don't know what to tell you. I just realised Lorenz Larkin fought and I didn't even watch it. So I'm going to have to go find that now on Bellator's website, which, if you're in England, redirects to their YouTube page. Cheers, Bellator. Right, I'm going to do a question and then get out of here for this week. It's a bit of a depressing one, so stay tuned. Hi, Jack. I don't know if you heard the news about Sandame sumo wrestler Hibiki Ryu dying. He was 28. He landed on his head in a match last month and was left motionless in the dojo for about 5 minutes before he was attended to medically. He basically never recovered. His death has gotten some international coverage from places like Yahoo, The Guardian, and BBC. Chris Sumo on YouTube witnessed/recorded it and has covered the incident pretty thoroughly since. I was hoping you could talk about Hibiki Ryu on your show. A death in any combat sport is a harsh reminder of what these athletes risk for our entertainment. Thanks, from Alex. Yeah, before we even start, this is a podcast where we make fun of just what a silly business fighting is. But I used to talk about this a lot more in the old days, and I used to get pretty indignant about it. And the podcast became more lighthearted as I got more comfortable on the microphone. But I used to go off on this quite a lot. I mean, this is the beginnings of my hatred for Scott Coker. Maybe hatred's strong. I enjoy making fun of Scott Coker, but there is an underlying distaste for a lot of the things that Scott Coker does, and particularly things like Ken Shamrock versus Hoist 3, Dada versus Kimbo. Meme fights, but also very dangerous. It's a very dangerous game, and yes, it's combat sports. People will die. That's the strange thing that I have to tell people at parties and my wife, and they think that I'm some kind of monster for just saying, yeah, people die sometimes, or yeah, people will die. You can't avoid that. The really depressing part of being a fight fan is, I must have seen, I don't know, 15, 20. There's been a few. I mean, I've watched loads of classic boxing ones, but I've seen a few deaths, a few fights that resulted in deaths, and it's very rare for someone to die outright in the ring. Normally it's just, oh, that was a bit bad. And then, oh, okay, well, they get in the stretcher. And a stretcher can mean anything. Billy Joe Saunders was stretchered to hospital at the weekend for a broken cheek. But, you're used to it. You're like, oh, okay, stretcher's wheeling him out, whatever. And then you find out later, oh, that guy died. And the really scary thing about being a fight fan is that often it's not at all the ones you think that cause the deaths. There was a kickboxer took it was the foot on a high kick, just sort of slapped over the back of his head. You have seen 1,000 of these, and you've seen guys get up and continue fighting from them, probably. But it caused his brainstem to hemorrhage, and he died. And that was the other week. There are ones like that, and then the other one is like, I lose my mind watching a lot of these refs, walking around on the other side of the cage, like strolling, like you would take a stroll through the park and you're looking back over your shoulder at someone. Rather than fucking facing the action, moving side to side, being ready to jump in. And I lose my mind over that and like the number of excessive blows that guys take on the mat. And it's so rarely is those sort of things. It's so rarely bad stoppages that actually cause deaths. A lot of the time it is just normal stoppages, or even, you'll see the odd early stoppage that you think, and then someone dies. It's very, very scary, the things that actually cause deaths in combat sports, and I'm not even doing it. I'm not in there competing, to have to think about that as a fighter would be horrible. Like, the Nigel Ben versus Gerald Mclennan, nothing was incredibly sketchy about that stoppage. The guy just, it was just a regular stoppage. There was some odd, moments in that fight, like Gerald Mclennan kept pushing his mouthpiece out so that he could, breathe through his mouth. Which, a little bit suspect, but nothing as egregious as some of the stoppages we see that then just don't seem to have it. Well, I mean, they all have lasting damage, but don't seem any more egregious, don't seem any more to affect the person than any other stoppage. So that's one of the weird things about combat sports, that you just kind of, and even now, decades into watching people getting hit in the head, knowing that it does lasting damage and knowing that people will die and having seen people die, it's still never quite comfortable. You never get to a point where you're like, yeah, that's okay. So, and I also just want to say that, that is kind of where my flippant sense of humor on this podcast comes from. There is this sort of school of thought where you have to be constantly dick sucking the fighters and be like, these guys are warriors and this, that, and the other. But really, it's more like doctors having a morbid sense of humor. I know how little a lot of these people are fighting for. I know how badly it's going to affect them later in life, and I know the chances of them dying in the ring. And if we're going to have fun watching it, we might as well have fun talking about it. And this all ties in with me wanting to get fighters paid better and things like that, because I think that's the bare minimum we can do for them. But anyway, more on to Hibiki Ryu specifically. If you haven't seen it, this is the thing. I always tell people, oh yeah, go watch that. And then I go, actually, maybe you don't want to watch someone die today, but you can watch someone die. You can watch Hibiki Ryu suffer the injury. It's pretty bad. But the thing that blew my mind, and I was chomping at the bit to shout about this last week, and I just sort of forgot to do it until this question came up. Blew my mind that Hibiki Ryu, these are 300-pound lads, 400-pound lads. He's going for a throw with a whizzer, he's doing an Uchimata or whatever, and the other guy's fighting him off, and he just sort of falls forward. They're fighting on loose sort of sand on the doyo, the sumo ring, and his foot slips and he lands on his face, and he goes face down, and he's clearly unconscious, or you would think he was unconscious from looking at him. And it takes, the Alex who sent this email, he said it takes 5 minutes, but I'm watching it, and a dude, his opponent is the first person to actually look concerned about him. The ref doesn't. No one runs on from the side. Finally, a dude in shorts and like a weird robe steps in the ring. And I was like, okay, so is that like the formal costume of the medic that you have at ringside? And he's just sort of poking him with his foot. Like, you okay? You gonna get up? Do you want to walk it off? You know, think of any knockout you've seen in the UFC, you know, or Bellator. You know, I'm just talking about big places that actually are worried about people dying and shit like that. Always, people come in, stay on the mat, don't get up. Then they'll transition you to a stool. They don't want you walking around. They don't want you getting up from being starched and shaking the other guy's hand. You know, the first thing that a lot of fighters want to do when they've scored a knockout is to check on the other guy and shake his hand. And the ref and the people around the guy who's fallen down will stop them. And one of the first things that happened after, like, I think it was the Gerald Mclennan fight, one of the first things that happened after it was talking about post-concussion care and, you know, having medics in position ringside. And also, the Gerald Mclennan thing was exacerbated by it taking them so long to get to the hospital. If you waste a solid 5 minutes before you even turn the guy over and fucking look at him, or try and, you know, assess what's wrong with him, more than just sort of prodding him with your foot, yeah, you're responsible for him dying. And it blows my mind because you can't go to like a kids martial arts competition, even like a non-contact one in the UK, without them needing like a medic or, you know, a group of people from St. John's Ambulance or whatever at the side just in case something happens. And you're telling me that like one of the most prestigious traditions in Japan, they can't have a fucking medic in position. And I lose my wick regularly about like how the way that the platform is raised in sumo, the doyo is up, and so many guys injure themselves falling from it because the goal is to push people out, and then there's no real edge before you fall off. And so many guys, you know, 400-pound dudes falling 3 feet to the floor. A lot of them twist their ankles, bust their knees up, then they get back on and go, oh, you know, they're limping when they get back on, and they didn't suffer anything except being pushed out of the ring. You know, it's literally the fall that's hurt them. But that's a weird part of tradition that they keep for tradition's sake. But if your tradition is to like not have doctors nearby, your tradition's fucking stupid. So, you know, you could probably do without watching that. But if you're not squeamish and, you know, you feel like you would benefit from seeing what terrible, terrible post-concussion care looks like, Hibiki Ryu's last match is a real... Yeah. Thanks, Alex. Right, I reckon that'll do us for today. We'll be back on Wednesday to talk about the upcoming UFC 262 card. It's real good, mate. It's real good. You've got Michael Chandler versus Charles Oliveira for the lightweight belt. You got tons of other shit going on. And yeah, it's going to be good. So if you want to get in on the extra stuff we do for the patrons, including this week's Advanced Striking 2.0 Tommy Loughran, if you like your old school boxing shit, sign up to the Patreon, support the podcast, keep me independent and not having to suck Bellator dick or UFC dick. If you want to send an email to podcast, jackslackpodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to see what I'm writing at any time, fightprimer.com. I am your boy Jack Slack, using Michael Page to solve the homeless crisis. Bless.